welcome to Concept to Culture. Today we have with us architect Gayatri, and the topic that we will be talking about is roots and rhythm, exploring culture, craft, and scale with Aanai Studio. Thank you, architect Gayatri, for making it here today and to be able to discuss processes so much about culture and craft. Beginning to ask you a little about your studio itself. I don't know if you are very aware of this, but I know of people who worked with you and you are certified for the kind of work culture that you've set up, the studio that you've set up. So I'll begin with asking you to sort of share with us the story of Aanai. What was the intention and how did it all begin?
Thank you, Pooja. First of all, thank you so much for having me here, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to speak about my work and also, in general, have a conversation about work with you. Thank you for having me. To start with, so Ane came about to be at around, I think around 7 years ago. So this June we are going to complete 7 years, and this May I have completed 10 years of practicing architecture. So I feel like the more I've been here, the more I feel like there's so much more to learn. All you think is, when you started out or when you reach the 10-year mark, you're going to have everything figured. But I can say that that's far from true. At the 10-year mark, you know that there's so much more to learn, and there's so much happening every day that you need to pick up. So in 2018, when I started Ane, the intention was to work with products as much as a part of design as we are doing with spaces. So we started initially with a furniture design studio, and my parents were our first scapegoats. I designed a chair for my father, and I would like to say that that was the most humbling experience ever. Designing a chair is, I think, the most challenging thing that one can do, and then it can really, really bring you back to earth. All of these concepts that we speak about design, principles, all of that can come crashing down when your chair is just not working. You're just not able to lean on. The angle was so off. The form was, well, the form was something. I don't know what it was, but I felt like that attempt to design a chair and to craft a chair really changed the way I look at design, the way I look at architecture, and the way I look at interior designing.
So that's where I'm just curious, where did this story of the name Aanai sort of come from?
Okay, so definitely I am an elephant lover, and I come from Kerala, and I've always been enamored by the gentle beings that they are. And when we started this, we started it as a furniture studio. So elephants used to carry around logs for furniture, all kinds of woodwork in earlier times. So it's more like a homage to elephants, and it is essentially Ana is elephant in Malayalam, and I am from Kerala, and I was for the individualization. So from the very beginning, the idea was that we're going to have custom pieces, not just for the people, but also custom pieces which contextually work in this space. And I felt that there was a gap in the market. Back then, when I started, we'd get to extreme details about, how a latch in a sliding folding door works, and, the kind of level of detailing that one does when we are doing architecture, when we are doing interiors. And then finally, after all of it is done, at a store, trying to buy a piece of furniture and kind of force fit it into this space. So I felt like the extent of thought and care that we put into designing spaces should also extend into the furniture. And honestly, I don't have any formal background in furniture design. Whatever I've learned it purely from my carpenters, and it was also a huge learning in the sense that when we go with a drawing and sit with them, and they're like, and I tell them make this, they would make it exactly as it is, with all its flaws, with all its lack of genuinity. And that is essentially what my biggest learning was, to listen to them, to ask them the right questions, and not just walk in there and intimidate them with a drawing and be like, okay, do this. the conversation that we have with our craftspeople really, really is an opportunity for all of us to learn. So that was what I've learned.
That's lovely. I think it's so beautiful because the conversations I've been having with a lot of architects and designers, I feel there's so much more voice to this now compared to when we ever spoke about. I feel it's a lot of times it's about the architect, the designer, the engineer, but there's very little voice given to these people who are actually executing all of this. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that story with us. I think for if you are at a juxtaposition, in some sense, an intersection of architecture, interior design, objects, right? So, how do you sort of approach design across these various scales? Because I think even when we initially were talking, you said there was something you wanted to bring when it came to, we speak about micro to macro, macro to micro, right? So, how do you sort of approach going about scale in a project like yours?
So definitely, like you said, it has always been micro to macro ever since I got into designing products. Before that, it would have been the usual, site zoning, site study. But now we start at a very, very user centric level first, understanding the people who are the end users. And though theoretically these are things that we've always studied when we are in architecture school, when we step out there and we start practicing, sometimes it's easy to get carried away by just what's happening in the trends of today. So coming back and reminding ourselves that it's the end user who matters, and to start the design process from there, that's what we've been trying to do. So even understanding to the extent that we are thinking of, this is a space which is going to be occupied by, let's say, 8 people at a time, which means that there has to be 8 different seating available for 8 people. And though it's very, very challenging to start thinking like that and then take it back to a larger scale, that's what has worked for us, making sure that okay, this space actually can be used by 8 people. So, though it's challenging to think like that and to, right in the beginning of the space planning itself, think that, okay, is there going to be a queen bed? Is there going to be a king bed? How's the circulation going to work around? And not come back to it at a later stage after the entire zoning is done. So there's always been a little bit of back and forth with that, to the extent that when we are designing windows, which is something that we very, very intently started incorporating into our practice. When we are designing windows, we're also thinking about window treatments, we're thinking about where the curtains are going to go and rest. So the furniture layout cannot be devoid of these smaller details. So that's essentially how we are designing now, and we take all of these elements, put it in a plan that works, and then we start thinking about maybe questions like materiality. So for us, it actually starts from a plan, and it starts from a section of the space.
That's really interesting that you mentioned this, and you also mentioned materiality, right, to an extent. So I think we live in a contemporary world in some sense where there is a lot of voice now for art and craft. And also, this very podcast, we call it Concept to Culture because it begins with a concept. And I think it's almost impossible to not have a cultural impact today in whatever sense, right? However you want to define culture. So I'd want to sort of ask you, how does cultural context of a place, because you've done projects through different parts of India, so how does it sort of impact the people, impact your users, right? The way I design in Bangalore will be very different from the way I would approach a design in Kerala, right? So how do you sort of as a practice navigate these design decisions when it comes to, because I do know through everything you're saying and the work you do, you're a very intentional practice. It's intuitive, it's custom made with a lot of love. You pick up from stories, right, of your clients. So if you can take us through a little of that process.
Okay, so one thing that all of us are very aware of right now is that we are all displaced in a way. So we are not really living in, let's say, our motherlands. We're not living where we are originally from. All of us are displaced in a very, very basic way, which makes us want to connect back to our roots. And more often than not, our home is the space where, we want to feel at ease. We want to have memories of things that we have experienced as a child in our ancestral homes. So, most often, the sense of place, that's where we start from. While of course the context matters a lot, in the sense that, of course, architecturally speaking, we are going to be looking at the context. We also want to integrate the very fabric of where the people are from into the design. So that could be with respect to the materials that we use, that could be with respect to art that we use. A lot of our clients happen to be Malayalis. I mean, I just think that they're drawn to the kind of work, and also because we keep doing that, it keeps coming out. But we worked with clients across India, from varying backgrounds. And the question that I always start with is, where are you from? What is it that calls out to you? What are you eager to bring into your space? So these are the questions that we start with, because we want to understand who they really are. And the question never starts with, are you looking for a contemporary design? Are you looking for a traditional design? Because if you really ask me, these words don't mean anything to me. What is contemporary? What is traditional? Everything is kind of transient, right? Everything keeps changing, the meanings change, and we keep readapting things to work in a way that we want it to work today. So we can't really be stuck to a specific style. But what we should, at the end of the day, be doing is addressing what a client's needs are, at a very soul level, like what is it that they are yearning for. And this I'm specifically talking about when it comes to residential projects, because that's what we use. Most 99% of our projects are residential projects. So that's what we are catering to. We are catering to the people, their emotions, and what is a home to them. So that's how we always start. And then the context of where it is, like you said, whether it's being designed in Bangalore, whether it's being designed in Lucknow, all of these things are going to come in when we are talking about a slightly larger material palette, what can be locally sourced. But we've also had clients from the north who have come and said that they really like the aesthetics of the south. And we're doing a very interesting project now where we are trying to bring in some of these elements. They do enjoy the colors, but we are doing this by using locally available materials from there. We are not taking anything from down south here and then kind of retrofitting it there. We're trying to see how we can bring about a similar experience with the local materials there. So that is an interesting experiment for us, because we are also catering to their requirement for something which has to do with aesthetics, but at the same time we want to be true to a eco-conscious practice. I wouldn't say sustainable, because it can, like, I just think that it's a tall claim to make, but definitely eco-conscious. So in order to be able to work with materials which are locally available, but at the same time bring in certain colors, certain aesthetics, certain elements that they enjoyed, from their stay when they were down south. So these are all different ways of making a house which is very, very specific to the client's requirements. Sometimes, when a client comes to us and they're like, okay, I'm from Kerala, I want a Kathakali painting in my home. And what we'd like to do is not say no to the Kathakali painting, but see how we can bring in that art form in a different format into the house. And it need not always be, exactly what you see. It can be beautifully woven into, intricate details within the house, and becomes like a very personal story to them. When somebody comes home and they ask, so what is this? I mean, it's not apparent that that's a Kathakali art, but there is a story behind it. That's what we try to do, and every time that's how we try to push our limits and get to the next level.
Right. So I think you were saying that it's been a decade you've sort of been in practice, practicing as a designer, as an architect. At what point did you have this revelation that, you know what, this is the tangent I want to take? I want to deal with local artisans, because I'm sure the first few years of architecture is a lot of unlearning, because there's so much that you've been told, taught, been influenced in some sense, inspired in some sense. How did you unlearn that? I'm asking you this question because I'm sure in the world we live in today, it's about the trends, it's about things which are happening very fast. How can a young architect, someone who's maybe wanting to take the leap of faith, take those plunges like you did at some point to say, okay, no, this is what I believe in, and this is the path I'm going to walk about. So if you can take us through that a little.
So there is definitely no right way to do this. You get into this, and eventually, like I think after the second project, I was very sure about the kind of clients that I want to work with and the kind of work that I want to put out there, and the need for it to be kind of rooted in the client's roots. It came very naturally because, like I said, I'm myself somebody who is displaced. I grew up in Bombay, and I have this yearning for all things Kerala, from all my holidays during my childhood. So I know that it's just something that pulls at your heartstrings, and a lot of the times the clients are chasing that. They're not chasing a trend. They're chasing that feeling of home which they got. And it may not be like where they were born or where their parents were born. It could also be where they grew up, but they are in a different place right now. To me, home has been my parents, but also it has been, those getaways to Kerala. So the principles that I brought into the design was also that, it's got everything to do with the people. And once I realized that, I think it was very clear what needs to be done next. It was clear that the process had to be designed and shaped in such a way that, I can help my clients answer these questions and kind of get to the root of it. Of course, we still have clients where, they're like, okay, Pinterest kind of creeps in, and it's fine. I understand because home is an emotion, right? Like different people want different things from their homes, and it's a very very complex thing to design. It can never be that okay, I come in with a concept and that's what gets built. There are a lot of people involved in this, and there are a lot of emotions that are involved in this, but somehow tying all of this back to the greater story and also using materials which age gracefully. So these are things that not I actually, we as a practice, we are trying to do, and the entire team is kind of working towards that goal.
So I think when you say, when you talk about the intention that you sort of set as a practice, I'm just curious to sort of know how important is it to sort of carry baggages into your practice? Because it is a two-edged sword. One is because it's a boundary that you draw to say, okay, this is how much it creeps into my practice, or it can be the biggest fire that sort of drives your practice, inspires you on a daily basis, right? It's small things because sometimes I feel without baggages, where is the concept? Where is the beginning point? So do you think that what do you
So
think
when you
about
say
carrying baggage?
baggages, what exactly do you mean when you say baggages?
I say baggages, the places you come from, the emotional significance it has, just like how you sort of explained, right? Taking that
Right.
forward. Aanai Studio might have not been the same if not for the experiences you've had, the places you've lived. So, in that sense,
Yeah. Okay, I mean, definitely it's important to have these experiences, but these experiences should not really come in the way of what the clients want either, right? So, like I said, it's about asking the right questions and understanding whether the clients are on the same page as you. We have this thing where we always say that okay, we'll do up to three options for you, and we've had clients ask why is it that you can only do three options, why not four or five? The reason is that by the time that we are at option three, if it's still not clicking, it's not going to click in the 10th option or the 15th option. There is
yeah.
definitely like a mismatch there, right? Like we are not thinking along the same tangent. And so my experiences, my baggages, they can be there, but they can't be the driving force behind everything.
Yeah.
There are certain things where I come in and say that okay, this is not going to work because we've done this in the past and this is just not going to work, and it may not turn out well. But if the client says that I understand that, I respect the experience that you've had, but I still want to give it a shot, we are no one to come and tell them that okay, like don't do it. Like we can't walk away from a project because a client wants something specific,
Yeah.
right? But having said that, the client also needs to have a clarity. Otherwise, we're all going around in circles and nothing really gets closed, right? So if they come with their ideas, it's fantastic. But if the ideas keep evolving, if it keeps getting inspired by multiple things around you throughout the design process, it gets a little challenging. So at some
Right.
point, you have to draw the line and say that, okay, ideation time is over. We need to get into the next step.
Do you think that comes with experience or is there more to it?
I don't know. I think you need to have, gumption. You need to actually put your foot down and be like, nope, this is not going anywhere. And sometimes we need to make these hard decisions because I think in design school, we're all taught that design is paramount. Nobody teaches you about running a business, but at the end of the day, you have to take care of your team. Like, if your team keeps having to repeat the same thing again and again and again, they're going to burn out. And like you said, that's not the culture that at least the younger generation is trying to work with. Like, we're trying to put an end to, the burnout that comes with not saying no.
Yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. I think this is honestly a dialogue which is the need of the hour because also in architecture school we glorify intensity. We glorify those work hours, which I think has somewhere translated into practices, right? So, and I think you're one of those practices who's really respected that and say, no, change has to happen somewhere, and you're beginning it with your practice. So, thank you for that. And I hope a lot more people get inspired by that. The next thing I want to come to is when we look at your work, right? Whether it is furniture or any space, there is some soul voice in it. It comes across like there's a lot of warmth. You know that it's not prototyped or it's not, something that it's made very specifically, like you've been talking all through the conversation. What does slowness or sensitivity in design really mean to you? Because I see that coming out through your spaces, right? So if you can tell us a little of that.
So 3 years ago, we split Aanai into two companies. When we started Aanai, the main focus was on furniture, and then it slowly evolved into architecture, interiors. In fact, I got my first project through my local grocer. When I started out, my grocer was like, "There's an unemployed architect who lives upstairs. So if anybody has something," so that's how I got my first job. So, we used to do product, we used to do interior designing, architecture, everything under the same umbrella to a point where it started getting a little too confusing. Our clients were not sure if they come to us, do they have to go with our furniture? Similarly, other designers were unsure if, do we make furniture only for our own projects? So, in order to kind of eradicate that confusion, we took a stand to create a separate brand for furniture. And it's called Taskar Kata, and it is run by my partner, Nikhil. So when Nikhil and I started Tasker Kata, we had another conversation about what these products should really mean. And you mentioned about warmth. I remember us joking about it, saying that, our pieces are always going to a house. It's not going to win a competition because, we're not doing anything like like really funky, and we're not making a chair in which you can't sit. But if there was a competition for a chair that worked, maybe. But it has been about that. And I know that right now in India, there's some phenomenal work happening in the furniture space. And, people are combining function and aesthetics and a lot of that funk. So I'm also very, very inspired by all of that that's happening around. But our focus has mainly been about, pieces for the home, pieces for the people, and may not be pieces which are like standing out every time, but pieces which are quietly fitting into your space and making your space work. So
Yeah.
that was a very intentional call. And though, like I said, once in a while I'm like, okay, let's make the chair on which nobody can sit. you know but it's just a bit like that. And every time, the team also, when they come up with something, there's this very sound voice of Nikhil's, which comes through, and they're like, he'll be like, but does this work? And it's I think it's important, especially for designers, to have that sound voice come in and ask you, does this work? So with architecture, with interiors, I think it's a lot more, our design process itself is driven by does this work? But with products, it's very important to go haywire. It's very easy to go haywire, with your thoughts and your creativity, because it's just like a product.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about all these conversations that we have internally in our studio, and it always coming back to, will this stand? Can you sit on it? Does this work?
Yeah. And how much of it is the process for you, and how much of it is the output? Because I feel the person who receives your output is just seeing the output. And that's the
Yeah,
argument also, right? About people don't understand why design is expensive. But there's such a, intricate process. So what is it for you? How much of what?
yeah. So one thing is design is expensive. The second thing is it is time consuming. And more often than not, the question that we get asked is, why 3 months? And we're working with the solid wood most of the times. We're working with natural materials which need to be cut up in a different way. And we use very, very minimal handheld tools. Everything else is made by our craftspeople. So these are also again time consuming things. And we don't manufacture anything in mass. In fact, even though we do have a catalog, a lot of the pieces that we work on are specific to the client, to the house, and that is time consuming, because every time there is no set mold that we are using to recreate again and again. Every time there's something new that we are creating, we're trying to add a different layer into it, maybe add a different craft technique into the work. So more than the cost part of it, I think that because people honestly are okay to spend on good things.
Yeah.
If what you're doing, they're okay to spend, but it's also about educating them about the process and telling them that, hey, if your housewarming is next week, you are way too late to be coming to us. So we have also, all the architects and interior designers who work with us, they have also intentionally started coming to us earlier when the work on site starts, so that they can also actually come to us with a brief and do something unique for the projects. So which is very exciting for us, because that's the main reason we set out to do what we are doing at Tusker.
Yeah.
So
And I think I'd sort of, end or wind up this podcast by asking you, what do you think is the role of design? A practice like yours, plays when it comes to preserving, evolving, or even reinterpreting, especially cultural narratives in 2025.
the role of design is to reinterpret a lot of the questions that we've been asking for the last hundreds of years to suit today's life, right? Whether it is a home where somebody is staying, or whether it's a public building where all of us are enjoying a concert. It's about really reinterpreting, and also while doing it, yes, aesthetics is important, but using materials which are sensible. It's nice and fun to have new materials being released every week, and to go and explore what it is. But if we don't ask about the longevity of these materials, if we don't question how long this is going to last and what is the impact this is going to have on your space, on on our environment, who is going to ask that, right? So, a designer's role is to keep asking these questions to ourselves, to the people who are making new products into new materials, and also to really have that conversation with your clients, your patrons, people who are really paying for things to be made. So, yeah, it's just the dialogue that we have with all of the stakeholders.
Right. And we've called this episode Roots and Rhythms. So what is Architect Gayatri's rhythm in some sense to say that drives you to show up every day to do what you do? What is it that really inspires you to say, okay, another day I get to do what I'm doing, because we're in a world of opportunities and you've still stuck to this, believed in it despite the hurdles and downfalls, and you're thriving in your own version of it, right? So, what would that be?
Honestly, it's not a new plan or working on a design that excites me. It's about creating systems that will make sure that everybody who's working here with us they really enjoy their work. So the senior team at Aanai is constantly striving towards making systems that work. And if these systems work, I feel, we're creating an environment where everybody can create wonderful designs. And that's what we want to do. Like, um, we want to create that environment in which, it is good design is inevitable, because you just feel like, okay, everything else is sorted, so you don't have to worry about the other things. So my focus day after day for me, coming to work, has been that, like, how to make sure that, things work. So that's what really drives me.
And if you had to leave the young designers, architects with one last message of inspired from your journey, if you want to tell them something about following their heart, following intuition, following your story, doing something from a place of your soul calling, what would it be?
You just have to do it, and it's okay to make mistakes. And like I said, right, after 10 years I feel like I know nothing, so I really even don't know if I should be, doling out advices. But you just have to take the leap, and everybody is going to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's what most young people need to hear. We'll all figure it out at some point, but take the risks, plunge, and I think we'll all find our centers in the chaotic world that we live in. So thank you so much for doing this with us. This was a wonderful conversation. So much more that we learned today about cultural narratives, about how a practice sort of translates what they believe in. And thank you for being so true to what you do and making this world a better place, one little home at a time.
Thank you so much, Pooja, for having me.